She was the most photographed woman in the world, the face that launched 1,000 magazine covers, the fairy tale princess who married a future king. But on the night of August 31st, 1997, as her car plunged into the darkness of a Paris tunnel, one question echoed across the globe. Was it an accident, or was she silenced? Here's what nobody knew. 2 years before that fatal crash, Diana wrote a letter saying someone was planning to get rid of her in a car accident. She was terrified. She told her lawyer the royal family wanted her gone. And then, it happened. But to understand how the world's most beloved princess ended up fleeing for her life through the streets of Paris, we have to go back to the beginning. Back to a lonely little girl who just wanted to be loved. This is the untold story of the people's princess. July 1st, 1961. A baby girl was born at Park House, a rented home on Queen Elizabeth II Sandringham estate in Norfolk. She was christened Diana Frances Spencer, the fourth of 5 children born to John Spencer, Viscount Althorp, and his wife Frances. But from the very beginning, Diana was a disappointment. Her father had desperately wanted a son, a male heir. When Diana arrived, the joy was muted. She would later say she always felt like the unwanted child. The Spencers were aristocrats, old money, deep connections to the royal family. Diana's father had been an equerry to both King George VI and the young Queen Elizabeth. Her playmates as a child were the Queen's younger sons, Prince Andrew and Prince Edward. She grew up in the shadow of royalty without ever really belonging to it. But behind the stately home and the privileged upbringing lay a house filled with tension. Diana was just 6 years old when her parents' marriage disintegrated. She would always remember the sound that haunted her childhood. The crunch of her mother's departing footsteps on the gravel drive. The day her mother walked out, Diana sat on the stairs and listened, frozen. I remember seeing my father slap my mother across the face, Diana later recalled on secret audio tapes recorded at Kensington Palace. I was crying on the floor. Mummy was crying an awful lot. The divorce was bitter, ugly, and played out in the full glare of aristocratic society. Diana's mother, Frances, had fallen in love with another man. Wallpaper heir Peter Shandkid. She left the family, and a vicious custody battle followed. Diana and her siblings became pawns in a war between their parents. In the end, Diana's father won custody of the 4 children. Her mother moved away. Diana was 7 years old, and she had just learned the most painful lesson of her life. The people you love can leave you. She was sent away to boarding school, first to Riddlesworth Hall in Norfolk, then to Westheath School in Kent. She excelled at swimming and music. She was an accomplished pianist, but academics were a struggle. She failed all her O-levels. Teachers described her as shy, quiet, and desperately eager to please. I hated myself so much, she would later confess. I didn't think I was good enough. But that's not even the most surprising part. Despite her insecurities, Diana had a gift that would define her entire life. She could connect with people. At Westheath, she was awarded the school's prize for the girl giving maximum help to the school and her schoolfellows. Even as a teenager, she was already showing the compassion that would later make her the people's princess. In 1975, everything changed. Diana's grandfather died, and her father inherited the title of Earl Spencer. The family moved to Althorp, the magnificent Spencer estate in Northamptonshire. And Diana, once just the Honorable Diana Spencer, became Lady Diana Spencer. She left school and attended a finishing school in Switzerland. But she didn't fit in there either. She returned to London, shared a flat with friends, worked as a nanny, and eventually took a job as a kindergarten assistant at the Young England School in Pimlico. She was young, beautiful, and utterly ordinary. She loved children. She loved dancing. She loved the simple things in life. And then, in 1977, she met a man who would change everything. His name was Prince Charles. November 1977. Lady Diana Spencer was just 16 years old when she first met Prince Charles. He had been invited to a weekend at Althorp. She was shy, awkward, and utterly overwhelmed by the presence of the heir to the British throne. But Charles noticed her. She was different from the polished, sophisticated women he usually surrounded himself with. She was genuine, unpretentious, and she made him laugh. Over the next few years, their paths crossed occasionally. But it wasn't until 1980 that something shifted. Diana was invited to a country weekend where Charles was also a guest. The spark was there. They began seeing each other more frequently. The press caught wind of it. Cameras started following Diana everywhere. She was hounded, hunted, and haunted by the paparazzi, a taste of what was to come. On February 24, 1981, the announcement came. Buckingham Palace confirmed that Prince Charles and Lady Diana Spencer were engaged. The world erupted in excitement. A fairy tale. A real-life fairy tale. A commoner. Well, an aristocrat, but still, marrying a prince. But here's what nobody knew at the time. When journalists asked the couple during the official engagement photo call whether they were in love, both answered yes. But Charles added something strange. He said, "Whatever love means." Whatever love means. It was an odd thing to say, almost as if he wasn't sure. Almost as if he was marrying Diana for reasons other than love. And he was. Charles was deeply in love with someone else. Someone he had known for years. Someone who was already married. Her name was Camilla Parker Bowles. Diana knew about Camilla. She had overheard telephone conversations between Charles and Camilla during their courtship. She knew there was another woman. But she convinced herself that once they were married, everything would change. Once she was his wife, he would love her. She was wrong. The engagement was just the beginning of Diana's nightmare. The stress of the public scrutiny, the pressure of becoming a royal, the knowledge that her fiancé loved another woman. It all became too much. Diana later revealed on her secret tapes, "Bulimia started the week after we got engaged. Charles said you're getting a bit chubby, and that triggered something off. She began making herself sick. The first time I made myself sick, I was so thrilled. It relieved me of tension. She would binge on food and then purge over and over again." She was crying out for help, but nobody was listening. Did you know? The engagement ring Diana chose, the now famous 12-carat oval blue sapphire surrounded by 14 diamonds, wasn't custom-made for her. She picked it from a catalog. It was the same ring that was available to any member of the public. Diana wanted something that felt normal. The wedding was set for July 29, 1981. St. Paul's Cathedral was chosen over Westminster Abbey because it could hold more people. The world was watching. An estimated 750 million people tuned in to see the fairy tale wedding. But on the morning of her wedding, Diana was not filled with joy. She was filled with dread. "I thought the whole thing was hysterical, getting married," she later said. "I was very, very deathly calm. I felt as though I was a lamb going to the slaughter. A lamb going to the slaughter." As she walked up the aisle of St. Paul's Cathedral in her iconic ivory silk wedding dress, with its 25-foot train, Diana searched the crowd for one face. Not Charles's face. Camilla's. "As I walked up the aisle, I was looking for her. I spotted Camilla," Diana revealed. In that moment, Diana knew the truth. She was marrying a man who loved another woman. But there was no turning back. The world was watching. The fairy tale had to continue. The couple honeymooned on a Mediterranean cruise. It should have been the most romantic time of their lives. Instead, Diana was shocked to find that Charles had brought 8 novels to read during their trip together. 8 novels. He barely spoke to her. He was distant, cold, and utterly uninterested in his new bride. Diana's bulimia worsened. Her depression deepened. And the fairy tale that had captivated the world was already crumbling behind palace walls. But that's not even the most shocking part of this story. For the first few years of her marriage, Diana played the role of the perfect princess. She smiled for the cameras. She waved at crowds. She gave birth to 2 beautiful sons, Prince William in 1982 and Prince Harry in 1984. But behind closed doors, she was falling apart. Life inside Buckingham Palace was suffocating. Diana was young, vibrant, and desperately lonely. She was surrounded by people, but had no one to turn to. The royal family was cold and distant. They didn't understand her. They didn't try to. "Maybe I was the first person ever to be in this family who ever had a depression or was ever openly tearful," Diana later said in her famous 1995 interview. And obviously that was daunting, because if you've never seen it before, how do you support it? The palace's response to Diana's struggles was not compassion, it was judgment. She was labeled unstable, mentally unbalanced. It gave everybody a wonderful new label: Diana's unstable and Diana's mentally unbalanced. And unfortunately, that seems to have stuck. The bulimia that had started during her engagement became a constant companion. She would binge and purge, sometimes multiple times a day. She hated herself. She felt inadequate, unloved, and utterly alone. I was trying to cut my wrists with razor blades. We were trying to hide that from everybody. I was just so desperate, she confessed on her secret tapes. The desperation reached its peak when she was pregnant with William. Overwhelmed by feelings of inadequacy and despair, she threw herself down the stairs while carrying her unborn child. The Queen came out and saw me and was horrified, Diana recalled. Horrified, not compassionate, not understanding. Horrified. This was the reality of Diana's life. She was trapped in a golden cage, surrounded by people who saw her struggles as a weakness rather than a cry for help. Did you know? During the early years of her marriage, Diana was so desperate for affection that she would often seek comfort from the palace staff, the butlers, the maids, the chefs. She felt more at home with the servants than with her own husband. But Diana was not just a victim. Even in her darkest moments, she was beginning to discover her own power. In 1984, a son was born, Prince Harry. Charles had wanted a girl. He was reportedly disappointed when Harry arrived. Diana later claimed that Charles said to her, "Oh God, it's a boy, and he's even got red hair." The marriage was already crumbling. Charles had resumed his affair with Camilla Parker Bowles around 1986. Diana knew. She confronted Camilla at a party in 1989. "I know what's going on between you and Charles. I just want you to know that," Diana reportedly told Camilla. But the affair continued, and Diana, heartbroken and humiliated, began to fight back. Not with anger, but with something far more powerful. She started to connect with the public, and the public fell in love with her. By the mid-1980s, Diana had become the most photographed woman in the world. Every move she made was captured by the paparazzi. Every outfit she wore was copied by millions. Every smile she flashed made headlines. But there was something different about Diana's fame. It wasn't just about glamour. It was about connection. When Diana visited hospitals, she didn't just shake hands from a safe distance. She sat on patients' beds. She held their hands. She looked them in the eyes and treated them like human beings. In 1987, she did something that changed the world's understanding of HIV/AIDS. At a time when fear and misinformation about the disease were rampant, when many people still wrongly believed it could be transmitted through casual contact, Diana walked into an AIDS ward at Middlesex Hospital in London. She didn't wear gloves. She didn't keep her distance. She sat down beside a dying AIDS patient, and she held his hand. The photograph of that moment went around the world. It shattered stereotypes. It saved lives. It showed the world that people with HIV/AIDS deserve compassion, not fear. Did you know? Diana was the first member of the royal family to have direct contact with an AIDS patient. Her act of compassion changed public attitudes toward the disease almost overnight. But Diana's humanitarian work didn't stop there. She became a patron of over 100 charities. She worked with the homeless, with cancer patients, with leprosy victims in Indonesia, with landmine victims in Angola. In 1997, just months before her death, she walked through an active minefield in Angola to draw attention to the devastating impact of landmines on civilian populations. She wore a protective vest and a visor, but she walked, slowly, deliberately, surrounded by danger. She was an activist at a time when there was so much stigmatization around AIDS and HIV, one observer noted. She's the one who went into AIDS wards and said, "No, I'm going to talk to people like they're normal human beings. I'm going to shake hands." Diana used her celebrity for good. She understood that her fame could be a force for change, and she wasn't afraid to use it. But while the world fell in love with Diana, her marriage continued to unravel. The press, of course, was fascinated by the drama. Every rumored affair, every whispered scandal, every glimpse of unhappiness was splashed across front pages. Diana was hounded by photographers everywhere she went. "I had a very bad time with the press. They literally haunted and hunted me," she said. The woman who was adored by millions was also being destroyed by them. The same cameras that captured her compassion also captured her pain. The same headlines that celebrated her humanitarian work also sensationalized her private struggles. It was a paradox that would define the rest of her life. Chapter 5. The War of the Waleses. Approximate word count, 950 words, 6 minutes. By 1992, The fairy tale was well and truly over. The marriage of Charles and Diana had become a public spectacle of mutual recrimination and blame. Charles had admitted his affair with Camilla Parker Bowles in a televised interview in 1994. Diana, in turn, had her own affairs, most notably with riding instructor James Hewitt. The press dubbed it the War of the Waleses. Every day brought new revelations, new accusations, new evidence of a marriage that had become a battlefield. In December 1992, Prime Minister John Major announced to the House of Commons that Charles and Diana had agreed to separate. The separation was a relief for Diana. She was finally free, at least partially, from the suffocating confines of her marriage. But it was also a time of immense uncertainty. What would happen to her? Where would she live? What would become of her role as a mother to William and Harry? Diana moved into Kensington Palace. She continued her royal duties, but she also began to carve out a new identity for herself, one that was separate from Charles, separate from the palace, separate from the constraints of traditional royal life. But the palace was determined to control her. They wanted to limit her public appearances. They wanted to diminish her influence. They wanted her to disappear quietly. Diana refused. On November 20th, 1995, she sat down with BBC journalist Martin Bashir for an interview on the program Panorama. Filmed in her sitting room at Kensington Palace, the interview would become one of the most watched and most controversial television events in history. Diana spoke candidly about her marriage, her struggles with mental health, her bulimia, and her husband's affair. She admitted to self-harm. "It was a symptom of what was going on in my marriage," she said of her bulimia. "I was crying out for help, but giving the wrong signals, and people were using my bulimia as a code on a hanger. They decided that was the problem." Diana was unstable. She also delivered the line that would become the most quoted of the entire interview. "There were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded. 3 people in the marriage: Charles, Diana, and Camilla." The interview was watched by over 20 million people in Britain alone. It sent shockwaves through the royal family. It shattered the last remaining illusions about the fairy tale marriage. And it sealed Diana's fate. The Queen was furious. She wrote to Charles and Diana, urging them to divorce. The palace could not tolerate this level of public humiliation. Diana, for her part, later said in the interview, "I'd like to be a queen of people's hearts and people's hearts, but I don't see myself being queen of this country." She knew she would never be queen, but she had already become something far more important. She had become the Queen of Hearts. On August 28th, 1996, the divorce was finalized. Diana and Charles were no longer husband and wife. The settlement was generous, a reported £17 million, plus an annual allowance of £400,000. Diana kept her apartments at Kensington Palace. She retained the title Princess of Wales, but she was no longer an official member of the royal family. It was both a liberation and a loss. Diana was free from the constraints of her unhappy marriage, free from the suffocating expectations of the palace. But she had also lost her status, her security, and her sense of identity. She was no longer a princess. But she remained, in the eyes of the world, the people's princess. Diana threw herself into her humanitarian work with renewed energy. She traveled to Angola to campaign against landmines. She visited hospitals and orphanages. She used her fame to shine a light on the causes that mattered most to her. But she was also a single woman in her mid-30s, trying to find love, trying to find happiness, trying to build a new life for herself. She had relationships. Some were serious, some were fleeting, but none of them seemed to fill the void left by her failed marriage. And then, in the summer of 1997, she met a man who seemed to offer the promise of something new. His name was Dodi Al-Fayed. But that's not even the most surprising part. Dodi Al-Fayed was the son of Mohammed Al-Fayed, the billionaire owner of Harrods department store. He was wealthy, charming, and known as a playboy. Diana had met Dodi a month earlier, when his father invited her and her sons, Prince William and Prince Harry, to vacation at his villa in St. Tropez. But it wasn't until July 1997 that Diana and Dodi began a romantic relationship. The summer of 1997 was a time of freedom and happiness for Diana. She was photographed laughing on Dodi's yacht, the Jonicle. She was seen shopping, dining, and enjoying the simple pleasures of life away from the cameras. But the cameras were never far away. The paparazzi followed her everywhere. Every moment of her summer romance was captured, analyzed, and splashed across front pages around the world. Diana didn't seem to mind. She appeared happy, carefree, in love. But was it love? Some who knew her doubted it. Diana's former private secretary later claimed that Diana didn't truly love Dodi. She enjoyed his company, his wealth, his attention, but she wasn't ready to marry him. The question of marriage became a subject of intense speculation. On August 30th, 1997, the day before the fatal crash, Dodi reportedly purchased a diamond ring. Some claimed he planned to propose. Others said the ring was just a gift.
An inquiry later found that it was unlikely Dodi proposed to Diana before they died. But the speculation continues to this day. Diana had other plans. She was scheduled to meet with her sons, William and Harry, in the coming days. She had been talking about a future that didn't involve Dodi. She was focused on her boys, her charity work, her life as a single woman. But she never got that chance. August 31st, 1997. The last day of Princess Diana's life began on the top deck of Dodi's yacht, the Jonquil, with croissants and fresh jams. It was a beautiful summer morning in the south of France. Diana and Dodi sipped their coffee, marveling at the Mediterranean views. They seemed relaxed, happy, at peace. Later that day, they flew by private jet to Paris. They checked into the Ritz Hotel, which was owned by Dodi's father. The Ritz was a favorite of Diana's. It was luxurious, discreet, and offered a level of privacy she craved. But privacy was impossible. The paparazzi had followed them from France. They were camped outside the Ritz, waiting for a glimpse of the princess. Diana and Dodi had dinner at the Ritz that night. They were supposed to return to Dodi's apartment, but they decided to leave the hotel and go to his apartment instead. It was a decision that would cost them their lives. At approximately 12:20 a.m. on August 31st, Diana and Dodi left the Ritz through the back entrance. They got into a black Mercedes S280. The driver was Henri Paul, the Ritz's head of security. Henri Paul was not supposed to be driving. He had been drinking. His blood alcohol level was more than 3 times the French legal limit. He was also on prescription drugs that would have impaired his driving. But he got behind the wheel anyway. And the paparazzi gave chase. The Mercedes sped through the streets of Paris, trying to escape the photographers on motorbikes. Henri Paul drove at high speed, estimated at between 96 and 120 miles per hour, into the Pont de l'Alma tunnel. Inside the tunnel, the car crashed into the 13th pillar. The impact was catastrophic. Dodi and Henri Paul died instantly. Diana was still alive, but barely. She had suffered massive internal injuries. She was rushed to the Pitié-Salpêtrière hospital. Doctors fought to save her, but her injuries were too severe. At 4 a.m. on August 31st, 1997, Diana, Princess of Wales, was pronounced dead. She was 36 years old. The world had lost its princess. Did you know? Diana was not wearing a seatbelt at the time of the crash. If she had been, she might have survived. The news of Diana's death spread like wildfire. Within hours, the world knew that the people's princess was gone. The reaction was unprecedented. An estimated 2.5 billion people, nearly half the world's population, watched her funeral on television. 1 million people lined the streets of London. Flowers piled up outside Kensington Palace and Buckingham Palace in mountains of grief. But the grief wasn't just about Diana the princess. It was about Diana the person. The woman who had held a dying AIDS patient's hand. The woman who had walked through a minefield. The woman who had shown the world that compassion and kindness mattered. People wept in the streets. They embraced strangers. They left teddy bears, letters, and photographs at makeshift shrines. They felt like they had lost a member of their own family. And in the midst of this global outpouring of grief, the royal family remained silent. The Queen was at Balmoral Castle in Scotland with Princes William and Harry. She refused to return to London. She refused to make a public statement. The palace didn't even lower the flag at Buckingham Palace to half-mast. The public was outraged. How could the royal family be so cold? How could they not honor the mother of their future king? The pressure became unbearable. Finally, on the day before the funeral, the Queen returned to London. She made a televised address to the nation. She spoke of Diana as an exceptional and gifted human being. But for many, it was too little, too late. The funeral took place on September 6, 1997, at Westminster Abbey. It was a ceremony filled with emotion, music, and tears. Elton John sang a rewritten version of Candle in the Wind. Earl Spencer, Diana's brother, delivered a eulogy that was both loving and devastatingly critical of the royal family. Diana was the very essence of compassion, of duty, of style, of beauty, Spencer said. She proved in the last year that she needed no royal title to continue to generate her particular brand of magic. The funeral procession was watched by an estimated 2.5 billion people worldwide. It remains one of the most watched television events in history. But even as the world mourned, questions began to surface. How could this have happened? Was it really an accident? Or was there something more sinister at play? Chapter 10, The Conspiracies. Approximate word count, 950 words, 6 minutes. Almost immediately after Diana's death, conspiracy theories began to circulate. They ranged from the plausible to the outlandish. But they all shared one thing in common. They questioned the official narrative. The official investigation, conducted by the French police, concluded that the crash was a tragic accident, caused by Henri Paul's intoxication and excessive speed. But many refused to accept this explanation. Mohammed Al-Fayed, Dodi's father, spent years and millions of dollars trying to prove that Diana and his son were murdered. He claimed the royal family had ordered the hit because they couldn't accept a Muslim stepfather for the future king. He pointed to the Mishkan note, a letter Diana had written to her lawyer in 1995, 2 years before her death. In it, Diana allegedly said she feared someone was planning an accident in her car to clear the way for Prince Charles to remarry. The letter felt chillingly accurate. Did you know? Diana had predicted her own death. In 1995, she wrote that efforts would be made to get rid of her or injure her in a car accident. Less than 2 years later, she died in a car accident. Other theories suggested that MI6, the British Secret Intelligence Service, had caused the crash by blinding Henri Paul with a strobe light. Others claimed Diana's car had been sabotaged. Others said the paparazzi had deliberately caused the crash. Operation Paget, a £3.7 million inquiry led by former Metropolitan Police Commissioner Lord Stevens, investigated 175 conspiracy theories. The inquiry produced an 832-page report. Its conclusion? There was no conspiracy to murder any of the occupants of the car. This was a tragic accident. The inquiry found that Henri Paul was drunk, driving too fast, and had not been paid by any intelligence agency. Diana was not pregnant, contrary to rumors that she was carrying Dodi's child. And the mysterious white Fiat Uno that some claimed had been involved in the crash was never found. But despite the official findings, the conspiracy theories persist. For many, it's simply too difficult to accept that the death of the world's most beloved princess was a random accident. There had to be more to it. There had to be someone to blame. And so the theories continue to this day. They are fueled by new documentaries, new books, new claims of cover-ups and secrets. The truth, according to every official investigation, is that Diana died in a tragic accident. But the questions will never fully go away. Chapter 11, The Legacy. Approximate word count. 950 words, 6 minutes. Princess Diana has been gone for decades. And yet, her legacy is more powerful than ever. Her sons, Prince William and Prince Harry, have carried on her work. They have championed causes that were close to her heart: mental health, HIV/AIDS awareness, homelessness, and landmine removal. William has spoken openly about the impact of his mother's death on his mental health. Harry has continued her work with HIV/AIDS, publicly taking tests for the virus and encouraging others to do the same. "I think she would be incredibly proud of them," one royal expert said. "They have taken her legacy and run with it." But Diana's legacy extends far beyond her sons. She changed the way the world thinks about royalty. Before Diana, the royal family was distant, formal, and unapproachable. After Diana, they became more accessible, more human, more willing to connect with the public. She also changed the way the world thinks about humanitarian work. She used her fame to shine a light on issues that were often ignored: AIDS, landmines, homelessness, mental health. She showed that celebrity could be a force for good. Diana was astonishing, but a complicated figure, one observer noted. She was both a victim and a survivor, both fragile and fierce, both deeply insecure and incredibly powerful. She was also a fashion icon, a style revolutionary who used clothing to communicate. Every outfit she wore was scrutinized, analyzed, and copied by millions. But more than anything, Diana was a symbol of hope. She represented the idea that even the most privileged among us could be kind, compassionate, and connected to the struggles of ordinary people. She was the people's princess. And she remains the people's princess. On August 31, 1997, the world lost a princess. But it also gained a legend. Diana's life was a story of contradictions. A fairy tale princess trapped in a loveless marriage. A global icon who felt utterly alone. A woman of immense privilege who connected with the most vulnerable among us. She was a mother who adored her sons and fought to give them a normal childhood. She was a humanitarian who used her fame to change the world. She was a woman who struggled with depression, bulimia, and self-harm, yet never stopped fighting. "I hated myself so much, I didn't think I was good enough," she once confessed. And yet, she was more than good enough. She was extraordinary. Diana showed the world that vulnerability is not weakness. That compassion is not naivety. That even in the darkest moments, there is hope. She also showed that the fairy tale is a myth. True happiness doesn't come from marrying a prince or living in a palace. It comes from connection, purpose, and love. Diana found those things, not in her marriage, but in her work, her sons, and her relationship with the public. She found meaning in serving others. She found purpose in using her platform for good. And in doing so, she transformed the monarchy forever. The royal family, once distant and untouchable, had to reckon with the legacy of a woman who brought them closer to the people. Prince William is now forging his own path, combining the best of his mother's empathy and his grandmother's duty. The monarchy is evolving, and Diana is the reason. Her death was a tragedy. But her life was a gift. Diana once said, "I'd like to be a queen of people's hearts, in people's hearts, but I don't see myself being queen of this country." She got her wish. She remains in people's hearts to this day. She remains the people's princess. So the next time you see a photograph of Diana, young, beautiful, smiling at the camera, remember the woman behind the image. Remember the lonely little girl who just wanted to be loved. Remember the young bride who felt like a lamb going to the slaughter. Remember the mother who fought to give her sons a normal life. Remember the humanitarian who held the hand of a dying AIDS patient. Remember the woman who, despite everything, never stopped believing in the power of kindness. Diana's story is not just a story about royalty. It's a story about what it means to be human. It's a story about pain, resilience, and the indomitable human spirit. It's a story that will never be forgotten. Because some people, no matter how much time passes, remain in our hearts forever. And Diana, Princess of Wales, the people's princess, is one of them.